Hey, welcome everyone. It is so fantastic to see so many of you here on a lunchtime, and thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate you. We always say that the most precious thing that you can give someone is your time. So thank you for being with us just for this lunchtime. And in a session, leading when you're not okay. I was thinking of renaming it earlier this morning, leading when your technology is not okay, because I've been having a few challenges. But it's so brilliant to be here. Please put in the chat where you're watching from. If you've got any questions you want to ask each other, any book recommendations, things that you found helpful in leadership, things that you're struggling with at the moment, then please, I really want this to be a safe and supportive space. So please write them in the chat as well. The other thing I really want to say is just for this next, we won't take the whole hour probably, but next was maybe just this half hour, 40 minutes or so. I would just encourage you to settle and to focus. If there's something I've learned about leaders is you can always tell a leader because they'll be emailing at the same time as doing something. They'll be multitasking. And I just want to encourage you, just gently encourage you to really invest in yourself for the next half an hour or so. And when I'm speaking, I can always tell the leaders because they're always on their phone doing emails and in the audience and stuff. And actually, if you read all the research, our brains don't multitask that well. They flick between one thing and the other. And then we wonder why we're so exhausted. So just encouraging you guys just to have this time for yourself. And as we focus on leading when we're not okay. Just really quickly before I get into the content, for those of you who don't know about Kimsugi, hope, literally 2 minutes. Kimsugi is a Japanese word that means golden joinery. So if we take a pot and we break it, we tend to mend it with super glue. And what they do in Japan is they put a gold powder in the glue. So instead of hiding the cracks, they make a feature of the cracks. Arguably, the object becomes more beautiful for being broken. It certainly becomes more unique. And I'm a firm believer that beauty comes from brokenness, that our scars are not there to be ashamed of. Our scars make us who we are. Jesus in his resurrected body had scars. There'll be scars in heaven. And to cut a very long story short, a couple of years ago now, me and my wife, Diane, who's on the chat as well, and we set up a charity to really try and support the church in supporting their communities in the areas of emotional and mental health. And we did this by running a 12-week program. So we train churches up to run a 12-week program loosely based on Alcoholics Anonymous to really encourage people to talk about their emotional mental health, to get peer support. It's not counseling, it's not therapy. It runs on Zoom, it runs in coffee shops, it runs in schools and youth clubs and sports and businesses and homeless shelters. It's just incredible, actually, what God is doing. And we're just going to show you now literally a 60-second video that goes around social media that churches use to invite people to their Kimsugi group. It's not ours, it's theirs, and they run it locally. So check this out, and then we'll get going into leading when you're not okay.
Life can feel like a game of Tetris. No matter what you do, sometimes the blocks don't line up. Days spent trying to keep all the plates spinning, but sometimes it's just one plate too many. Or perhaps you're giving out of an empty cup. Some of us invest in our physical well-being. Why not invest in your mental and emotional well-being? We can all feel broken, but we can all discover treasure in life's scars. Join a Kimsugi Hope Wellbeing group.
So there you go. And if you're interested in running a Kintsugi wellbeing group in your school, in your university, in your church, particularly if you want to outreach into your community, but also use it as a way of getting people to talk about some of these issues within your church, then we run these information sessions. We get so many phone calls. So what we decided to do is just run an info session where people can come on for an hour and ask questions. And the next one, I think, is in a couple of days' time on the 15th of July. And you can basically book into that. It's free, and you can find out about safeguarding and the syllabus and the training and all that sort of stuff. I was reflecting this morning, actually, what was one of the most important things I've done to invest in my own mental health. And I joined a Kintsugi group as a participant. I didn't run it. I was a useless assistant leader, and I just found it incredible. I got to know people in my church better than I've ever known them. I learned from some of the people of no faith in my group who wouldn't normally meet. Some of those mums, they are so resilient. They do so much. They're incredible. And it was incredible for me. I learned so much. And my friend, Matt Summerfield, as some of you will know, he's a church leader in Hitchin. He did it for his neighbours because he was like, you know what? In church culture, sometimes I'm just surrounded by church people, which is great. But actually, I really just wanted to reach my neighbours. And so he did it, and he had an amazing time. So if you're a leader, I think sometimes the temptation is to delegate this or get someone else to do it. But sometimes it's really good to actually be really intentional. There was another church I know, they were struggling to get people to sign up. And then the curate signed up, and then suddenly it was packed. I think some people have been a bit nosy to find out what the curate was like. But actually incredible when you model that type of leadership. Anyway, that's enough of that. Why this event? Well, the reason we did this event is really from so many conversations that I've had with leaders recently, where just talking about how challenging it is. And, feel free to write in the chat some of the pressures that you feel that leaders are under at the moment. But leaders are, and I'm sure you're aware of this, are having to make really quick decisions based on limited info, and often are judged incredibly harshly. One of the biggest challenges I find as a leader is friendly fire. I don't know if you find that sometimes, where it's people who you think are there for you, sometimes, aren't in the same ways you need them to be. I think that at the moment we're living in a really hypersensitive, emotionally charged atmosphere, aren't we? And leaders are constantly having to correct wrong assumptions. And I feel that as leaders, we need to have a culture shift, where we can be real and honest and not constantly scared of feeling that, if I'm real and honest, am I going to be misunderstood? There's financial pressures I'm seeing on leaders. There's huge staff turnovers. In lockdown, people have gone, I'll have a rethink about what I want to do. Logistical issues. Everyone wants to roll over their holiday because of COVID. And there's so many people that are like, I wasn't trained to be a fundraiser. I wasn't trained to do all the practical stuff that I have to do in my leadership role. I wasn't trained in time management. I don't know how to do these things. And so often we're taught so little about caring for our mental and emotional health. Someone described it on a blog like this. It's almost like we've run 2 marathons. We've run this marathon through various lockdowns, and the finishing line's there. And as you cross the finishing line, someone slaps a number on your back and says, go on, go again. Now you've got to do exactly the same, but online and offline. I have so many leaders that message me privately that go, you know what, I am on the edge of burnout. And some of my friends are just getting really ill. And other people have gone, I struggle with my mental health, but as a leader, I don't think I can tell anyone because I'm scared I might be moved on or people might think I'm weak, which I guess is crazy because if you had a broken leg, you wouldn't really be worried about telling anyone, would you? You would just tell them. And so today's event, really, guys, is me just sharing my heart around what I learned on leadership on 30 years. And I'm a pilgrim. I'm still learning. I thought about when I did this event, I have got access to incredible leaders. I thought I could get this amazing panel and we could have CEOs on it and business leaders and politicians. And I was like, you know what? I'm a little bit paneled out and a bit, I'm just going to share my heart for half an hour and hope that's okay with you guys. And but please, if you've got any questions, stick them in the chat. If I can get to them at the end, I will. But if not, we'll try and use the questions to help us. You're going to get no magic answers here, and some of the stuff I might say might be quite provocative as well. But please, let's go on this journey together for the next half an hour or so. I wanted to start. There's four key things that have really helped me, but I wanted to tell you a really tiny bit of my story. I feel like in my area of leadership, I've always been surrounded by lots of pain. I've traveled a lot. I've seen extreme poverty, had to deal with some really challenging domestic violence cases. When I lived in London, lots of issues with knife crime, dealing with mums, going to memorial services, whose kids have been killed, taken away just too early. A lot of young people who completed suicides at such a young age. And when you're surrounded by so much pain, it's really easy, isn't it, to become a bit of a sponge, and to not process the pain that you're going through, because the pain that you're going through is not comparable to a mum, for instance, who's lost their kid to knife crime. And I could sense to myself that I didn't want to be a sponge, but equally I didn't want to have a heart of stone. And how do I deal with this? I remember in one of my books, Diane wrote a chapter called Secondhand Smoke. I don't know, some of you are probably old enough to remember the entertainer Roy Castle. He died of secondhand smoke. He never smoked in his life. And because secondhand smoke can still kill you. And so it's actually, I think, one of the key things as leaders is working out, when we hear all this stuff, when we hear it, we don't want to have a heart of stone, but equally we can't be a sponge for people's pain. How do we deal with the pain? And how do we deal with all the other pressures that are around us? I didn't deal with it very well. I ended up in A&E one night, and I had huge amount of chest pain, and I was in that zone where I don't know if you've ever been in that zone. I think I'm going to die. It is, I was absolutely panicking. And I'll never forget the doctor. It was absolutely superb with me, and they gave me all the blood tests and everything that I was meant to do. And then she just looked at me and went, "Is your job pretty stressful?" And I was like, "Yeah, I guess so." And she goes, "Yeah, I feel like, take this the right way. You're going to need to start making some changes." But I realized that what I did is I'd rest a bit and then about 2 weeks later go back full charge. I think some of us get into these rhythms where if you've got your phone right, what you do is your phone works as well on 10% as it does 100%. Think about it. There's nothing my phone can't do on 10% that it can do on 100%. Nothing. It just doesn't last very long. And I feel like some of us have got into damaging rhythms, actually, that means that's what happens. I went through my own challenges. Some of you will know, health-wise, had to have a major operation on my legs that literally took this activist who was running around trying to change the world to being someone who couldn't get up. There's a photo coming up of my leg here for those who want to see it. That's the inside of my leg, which is a little bit weird, I know. That frame was on for 6 months to a year. It took 7 years for me to get the courage to go through with the operation. Learned so much in that period of time. And then the weird thing is I had to have it done again. So it was weird walking into hospital knowing that I wouldn't walk out. But then everything else started to go wrong. Kids started getting sick. Dad got cancer. It felt like a game of Tetris. Who remembers Tetris? Just give me a zoom, hand in the air if you remember Tetris, if you're as old as me. For those of you who don't, Tetris is when all these blocks fall out of the sky and you've got to get them into a straight line. And the whole idea is you get them into a straight line, then the line disappears, but then it just keeps going. And it gets faster and faster and faster. And eventually it literally is just game over. And I feel like sometimes leadership feels a bit like a game of Tetris. You are literally trying to line everything up, and it gets faster and faster and faster. I said to my PAs yesterday, if people only realize the energy it takes to stand still, not alone to develop something, it's huge. But my challenge was, I guess, the show reel, what I was portraying to the outside world looked pretty good. We had some visits from the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge. I hope you caught those names as they dropped there. And they came along with the world's media. In fact, they came twice in a year. Here's my wife, Diane, sitting next to the Duchess of Cambridge. There's a funny story, actually. The Duchess of Cambridge has just turned to Diane and said, "Do you like my dress?" And Diane was like, "I'm not sure what you meant to say when the Duchess of Cambridge says, 'Do you like my dress?' It's a very nice dress." And she went, "Oh, that's good. William says I look like a tablecloth." So if you're looking a little bit closer, I think he might have a point. And but you know what? These pictures went around the world, and literally, OK magazine, this magazine, that magazine. And the reality is, everyone kept texting me. My Facebook looked fantastic. But in these pictures, I am struggling. I am struggling with really severe anxiety. just to go in a time of depression where I was like, I'm not even sure I want to be here anymore. I just felt so low. And then I looked around saying, I'm a leader, but I don't want to quit, and there are times where you need to stop. Obviously, there's times where you need to stop, and it's hard. You've got to get people around you to help you work that out. But there was like, I know I still got something to offer. And I started to think about mental and emotional health, thought about all the sermons I'd heard about it over the years, which took me about 2.5 seconds. When I told some other people about anxiety, they told me that I wasn't trusting God enough. Depression was a sin, apparently. I'd allowed the devil in my life. I didn't have enough faith. There's all these platitudes with people with just the most well-meaning, lovely people, but it just wasn't helping me. And I was desperate. And I guess what really got me was the shoulds, the must, I oughts. Have you ever used these words? I should be able to cope with what's wrong with me. I've got a family to look after, a team to lead, a job I'm passionate about. I must pull myself together. I ought to be stronger. I need to spend more time praying. So I was fed up. And out of that time, actually, I didn't quit. I wrote a book. It's cheaper than therapy for me, called Honesty Over Silence. And I felt broken, and I just fed up with the show. I'm fed up with just being unauthentic, pretending everything was okay, desperate for something real, like the Psalms. 40% of the Psalms are lament. They're David turning towards God in his pain. And there was this one chapter on challenging stigma where the psychiatrist, Tim Katpaner, basically wrote this book called Depressive Illness, The Curse of the Strong. And he said that he can work out the personal characteristics of someone who is depressed, normally 9 times out of 10 before they come into his office. And he said they're these: moral strength, reliability, diligence, strong conscience, a strong sense of responsibility, a tendency to focus on the needs of others before one's own, sensitivity, vulnerability to criticism, self-esteem dependent on the evaluation of others. I wonder how many of us recognize some of those characteristics. And the interesting thing, he said, people that struggled with this actually were Winston Churchill, Vincent van Gogh, Abraham Lincoln, Oliver Cromwell, Mother Teresa. They are probably like, when you think of them, they're just not, you don't see them as weak people, right? And I realize that sometimes as leaders, it's not that we're weak people, it's that we tried to be strong for too long. We need a change of culture around leadership. We need a change. If you define culture as the way we do things around here. So I'm really simply going to share, just if that's the issue, just 4 things that have helped me. And I'm sure there are loads of people on the chat that have got things that have helped them. Throw it in. Let's do this together. Number 1, the whole thing that courage and vulnerability are the same thing. The Latin word for courage is cur. It means to speak your mind with your heart, to show up and let your true self be seen. That involves vulnerability, right? And I know leaders are really grappling with this. What's vulnerability? What's oversharing? How do I do that as a leader? Well, just to give you a break from my face, I probably got the one of the most amazing people have written about this, just to share for 2 minutes some amazing insights. Check this out.
In order for transformation to happen, in order for there to be success by any metric, money, stock price, market share, whatever your metric is, you can't get there without brave leaders and courageous cultures.
You can teach courage.
Oh, you can absolutely teach courage. 4 skill sets. Number 1 being vulnerability.
I bet you that not too many years ago, if you had corporate leaders talking about their vulnerability and discussing shame in the office place, they'd have been laughed out of the office.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's still the case in some places. It's just, if you're at the top of a Fortune 500 company and your success metric depends on creativity and innovation, and you've set up a culture where vulnerability is seen as weakness, don't expect great results.
Don't expect the creativity.
No, because, I mean, innovation by definition is idea, iteration, failure, iteration, failure, iteration. Places where they're doing the most remarkable kind of high risk, high reward innovating, huge tolerances for vulnerability. And so if you have leaders who are either preaching a gospel of vulnerability is weakness are modeling that. Just don't expect great things.
You have said that vulnerability without boundaries is not vulnerability. What do you mean by that? I'm not sure I understand.
When I go work with organizations, sometimes I'll hear someone say something like, how often should I cry in front of my team? And I'm like, oh my God, like that's not what I'm saying. Vulnerability is not about, self-disclosure. Like I know leaders who never cry, who are very vulnerable and transparent. And I know leaders who cry all the time who are just BSers. And if there's, vulnerability is great. Faux vulnerability or like fake vulnerability, because vulnerability seems to be a thing right now. That pisses people off.
So you're not advocating for people to just put it all out there.
No, all I'm saying about vulnerability is that when you are in uncertainty, when you feel at risk, when you feel exposed, don't tap out. Stay brave, stay uncomfortable, stay in the cringy moment, lean into the hard conversation, and keep leading. Stay brave. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying you need to overshare. I'm not saying you need to disclose. I'm not saying you need to weep uncontrollably to show how human you are. I'm saying try to be aware of your armor. And when you feel vulnerable, try not to transform up. Try to stay human, keep leaning. Very different things.
Really, really helpful clip, looking at what is vulnerability, what is oversharing. And of course, I'm sure many of you will be aware of the work of Brené Brown, and there's loads of clips on that on YouTube. But I think the interesting thing, isn't it, is she often says that vulnerability is courage in you, but weakness in me. And so we've got to grapple with this. How do we create a more honest culture? And I get that there are people here from all sorts of leadership traditions. I know there are teachers here, there are people in business here, there are people, many church leaders here. And I really hope that whatever I say, there's no jargon to it. I hope it's real. I hope it's honest. But for those of us our faith, I think sometimes, we can sugarcoat everything, try and silver line everything. 2 Corinthians 1 verse 8 says, this is Paul talking. He says this: we do not want you to be uninformed, brothers and sisters, about the troubles we're facing in the province of Asia. We are under great pressure, far beyond our ability to endure, so that we've despaired of life itself. The reality is, people don't always connect with your success stories, but they do connect with your scars. My chair of trustees is Simon Barrington, who many of you will know. He's written on leadership. He did a survey around what are millennials looking for in leaders. What are the characteristics that millennials are really after? And it was fascinating. The 3 key things that he came up with was passion, humility, and integrity. Passion, humility, and integrity. We've got to find different ways. The second key thing, and this bit always gets people going a little bit, and so I want to be really, really clear. The second key thing is to realize that acceptance and resignation are 2 really different things. There was a survey done, how to survive a concentration camp, that was looking at people that survived Auschwitz and POW camps and all this sort of stuff. And what was fascinating was the ones that didn't get out of concentration camps were the optimists. The optimists would say, we'll be out by Christmas, we'll be out by Easter, it's all going to be okay. Cheer up, everyone. They died, actually. And recently, I had the absolute privilege of interviewing Eva Charlotte, who was Anne Frank's stepsister. And it was just incredible. And we were talking, and actually the people that survived Auschwitz were those that accepted the situation they were in, adapted to it, but never lost hope. Accepted the situation they were in, realized this is going to be tough, adapted to it, and almost found some purpose in the day-to-day, but never lost hope. So often we say, why me? Well, why not me? What makes me different? Archbishop Desmond Tutu says this: we are meant to live in joy. This does not mean that life will be easy or painless. It means that we turn our faces to the wind and accept that this is a storm that we must pass through. We cannot succeed by denying what exists. The acceptance of reality is the only place in which change can begin. Now think about this. Archbishop Desmond Tutu, he was one of the most poverty-fighting guys around. He didn't accept poverty, but he realized that acceptance and resignation are two different things. Acceptance is the first place to healing. And yet somehow, and I think particularly in church culture in the 80s, I don't know, in early 90s, there was this toxic positivity where you weren't allowed to be negative, or you were accused of being negative. We sometimes are going to make change. I keep on saying to people this: don't just carry on saying, once this project is over, after this funding bid is done, once this book is written, we'll all be okay. What you're doing is actually developing really damaging habits, and you're pushing yourself too hard. So you need to not be ashamed for asking for help. Struggling doesn't mean you're a failure. It means you're a human being. And, the question is, what damaging habits, what theology have we just sucked in without thinking about it sometimes? We've always got to have a success story. We preach success story after success story. And I love success stories. So please hear my heart. I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm just asking for a little bit of balance. And I think for some of us as leaders, we need to accept where we're at. I don't know if you've, I don't particularly watch Americans Got Talent, but that little YouTube video went round of a lady called, she goes from the name of Nightbird. And if you haven't seen it, it's incredibly moving. Maybe I'll get a chance to play it at the end. She's gone through many, many different cancer journeys. And in fact, she's got a 2% chance of survival. And when they were interviewing her, and they were asking her about it and the way she is, she basically said this: you can't wait for life not to be hard anymore before you decide to be happy. I think that's amazing, because the reality is there will always be blessings and battles. Rick and Kay Warren talk about the railway tracks, don't they? That the two, they will always go side by side. Blessings and battles, blessings and battles. There is a massive difference between healing and cure. So when it comes to my anxiety, I sort of say, I hope God's healing me every day. I've learned to manage it. On the odd days, it gets pretty bad, I'm not going to lie. But I haven't been cured, but I am getting healed. And I think that's really important. Any of you that have been on a mental health journey, it's a roller coaster. I love this image coming up here. This sort of describes my life, I feel like, a little bit. It's like, oh no, not again. I thought I sussed it, but I've got back into bad habits, or stuff's happened, and it happens, and so we've got to accept it. The third thing, I've described as, how do we develop resilience then? Alan Scott says this: the future doesn't belong to the brilliant, which is a relief for me, but the resilient, not to those who avoid scars or pain, but to the wounded healers who choose to give again. How do you develop resilience when you're not doing okay? And a lot of you would know that over the last year, I've been delving into so much study around resilience. And a lot of people describe resilience as bouncing back. Will the economy bounce back? Will the church bounce back? Will education bounce back? Will the NHS bounce back? And I was like, I'm not sure I want to bounce back. Why do I want to go back to my pre-trauma self? I've learned so much in the last 16, 18 months. Lessons I don't want to learn again in some ways, because they were hard lessons to learn. But I don't want to go back. I want to take the good and the bad. And so I wrote this book called Bouncing Forwards, Notes on Resilience, Courage and Change. And the research actually blew my mind. I studied psychology, business, activism. We looked at poets like Michelangelo, amazing people like Brian Stevenson, the Just Mercy guys. And it was just incredible. I mean, a quote from the Harvard Business Review says this: more than education, more than experience, more than training, a person's level of resilience will determine who succeeds and who fails. That's true in the cancer ward, it's true in the Olympics, and it's true in the boardroom. Resilience isn't simply just trying harder and being tougher. Libby Webb says this: the best thing anyone described resilience to me was as emotional sunscreen. It's not covering yourself with a protective shield, but creating a protective layer, because the sun can burn you no matter what. It's not going to go away. And so as we started to grapple with how do we build resilience, we looked at this analogy, and my PHS and her husband Matt made this beautiful animation for me, which is just 60 seconds long, which talks about the resilience river. Check this out, and then I'm going to talk about how we can apply this to ourselves as leaders.
Resilience is like a river. Its levels can go up and down. On good days, when the water is flowing, we feel loved, encouraged, and supported. We may float over the rocks and the challenges. But there are bad days too, where our levels are lowered. Trauma, loneliness, trying to fit in. The water has stopped flowing, and we are more likely to crash. What are the things that lower your resilience levels? And what brings them higher? Get your copy of Bouncing Forwards now.
So the resilience river, there's going to be an image that comes up on your screen here. Basically, what we're looking at is what raises our levels of resilience and what decreases them. Now, what you can see at the bottom there are a bunch of rocks, right? And I guess these rocks symbolize things that happen in our lives. So for me, a rock is anxiety. Now, if my resilience levels are low, I'm more likely to crash into that rock, right? Another rock can be disappointment. In ministry and in life, disappointments happen. I think Rob Parsons famously says, you will have disappointments with yourself, disappointment with others, and disappointments with God. And if your resilience levels are low, you're likely to crash. Health for me, my physical health, I can't run, gets me down sometimes. I can't play football. I can cope with it. If I'm depleted, I'm likely to crash. Complex relationships, criticism, I mean, it goes on. But so the question's got to be, is what are the things that I can do to increase my resilience level? What are the things that I can bring my resilience levels up? So I'm going to show you my resilience river. And that image on the way, you can download that off our website. I would encourage you to do this with your staff team, with your business, with your teachers. We did this as a staff team, just so helpful, realizing where other people were at. And it's completely free. You can download it after this. And do it for yourself as well. It's just so helpful. So here's me being a little bit vulnerable. Here's my resilience river coming up now. And you will see the things that start to push me down and the things that lift me up. Now, what I've noticed with leaders, not exclusively with leaders, but particularly I think leaders struggle with this more, is they're actually quite good, and I think we all are, at describing what brings us down. What we're pretty rubbish at working out what are the things that lift us up. What are the things that actually increase our levels of resilience? Because we're going to have to lead when we're not okay. Because life isn't perfect, like we've always said. One of the key things I put down there is self-compassion. I used to hate this term. I was like, it is one of those wussy terms. I am a bloke. I don't do baths much, candles. It sounds selfish, inward looking. And I remember I went to a Christian therapist and she was talking to me about this, and I could see her looking at me going, do you know what? You've totally misunderstood what self-compassion is. Self-compassion and self-indulgence are two different things. You think that self-compassion is the extra glass of wine at the end of the day to take the edge off, or Netflix for hours and hours. Actually, self-compassion takes discipline, and real discipline at times. Self-compassion is simply this: talking to yourself the way that you would talk to your best friend, because you wouldn't dream of putting your best friend under the pressure that you put yourself under. And I don't know how many of you, listen, you can write in the chat, find self-compassion easy. Why do we never talk about it in church culture? Who's your biggest critic? I can guarantee for most of us, our biggest critic is ourselves, right? Is our inner critic. When you think about your inner critic, what does it look like? What does it sound like? You know, my inner critic, there is nowhere it won't go. It tells me I've fallen short. It tells me I need to try harder. It tells you why on earth are you running an event for leaders when the people listening to you are probably far better equipped to deal with all this stuff than you are. There is literally nowhere it won't go. It tells me you've got an OBE because everyone around you is much cleverer and it's just a fluke. And it's aggressive. It's accusing. It also, and I guess if you're a leader, you relate to this, always constantly compares you to other leaders. And I actually think we need to challenge the whole notion of success, but that's another talk. It completely compares yourself. It takes a weakness and turns it into identity. And actually, we've got to work out, what would we be kind? If we were talking to our younger selves, what would we say? Would we treat ourselves with much aggressive and much higher standards? You put yourself under more pressure than you wouldn't dream of putting other people under the pressure you put yourself under. I don't know, do you see this photograph going around Facebook? Great. And well, if you did see this photograph, the photograph that you'd be looking at is of Gareth Southgate talking to his younger self. And I put on Facebook, if you could say anything to your younger self, you can do this in the chat if you want, what would you say to your younger self? And I'm obviously not talking about the football. I'm talking about, what would you say to your younger self? The answers I got were, don't work so hard. Your failure will enable your success. You'll get through this. Believe in yourself. Ignore the lies being told about you. Don't fear failure. It's okay to be yourself. Don't miss your children growing up. And I just want to encourage you guys, and I know it might sound simplistic, but listen to an alternative voice. I get the sleepless nights, the struggling, the heterospots coming out, that constant feeling of guilt. So you've got to get this alternative voice. So what I'd encourage you to do is, here's an alternative voice. If you've got a phone, you can take a picture of this on the screen. I would recommend that you do it. You have it as your screensaver. You stick it on your Facebook and on your Twitter feed. Let me be the alternative voice for you just for a couple of minutes. How about, as well as all the stuff, and I'm not saying there's things we can't improve on. Of course there is. We have to take responsibility. But how about you're doing the best you can? Making a mistake doesn't make you a failure. Struggling doesn't make you a failure. It makes you a human being. No one is perfect. It's okay not to be okay all the time. It's okay that not everyone will like you. Oh my goodness. Everyone's allowed a bad day. And you are so loved. So when your inner critic gets noisy, please remember that. And hopefully it will help you lead when you're not feeling okay. The last thing I want to say is, and I think this is really important, and it's simply this, is we are not the hero. We're not the hero. And, the big difference between the whole bouncing forward thing and a self-help book is not about what we're becoming. I can't look inside myself and go, I can reach inside myself, love myself, and it's all going to be okay. It's not about who we're becoming. It's about who we belong to. And accepting that we don't have to be the hero. In fact, I think accepting our limitations is a real sign of maturity. And I don't know how many of you remember that song, History Makers. Little Zoom hands up, History Makers. We're going to take God everywhere. We're going to do it. We're going to change the world. Great song. I just got knackered trying to do it. And sorry, I probably shouldn't say that. The call to leaders. It just exhausted. But I realised that actually I don't take God everywhere. God's already there. And I need to join in with what he's doing. And John Mark Comer, points out in his book, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, that limitations are good for us. But both somehow inside and outside the church, it isn't a popular message. He says, imagine a book, Accepting Your Limitations and How to Make Peace with Your Mortality and Cosmic Insignificance. It's not really the sound of a bestseller, is it? But we're limited. There's only 24 hours in a day. None of us are going to live forever. Our brains and bodies are limited. I am very limited when it comes to admin. And our personal circumstances. I've got 4 kids. I can't travel around the world the way I used to, doing all that stuff. It was great. But actually, there is a sense of responsibility. And so I pray that we would realise we're not the hero. The other thing I'd really want to say to leaders is, for some of us, we need to stop running everything. And I know that is a really unpopular message as well. We need to work with others more. We need to not worry about our brand and our logo. You know, someone said to me, everyone talks about networking, but in reality, everyone does their own thing. We need to keep the main thing the main thing. And sometimes that's hard, actually, choosing what you're going to stop. But we can't run everything. You know, Brené Brown famously talks about boundaries. We've got a great quote here, which is fascinating. She says, the most compassionate people I've interviewed are also the most well-defined and have the well-respected boundaries. It surprised me at the time, but now I get it. They assume that other people are doing the best they can, but they also ask for what they need, and they don't put up with lots of crap. Compassionate people ask for what they need. They say no when they need to. And when they say yes, they mean it. They're compassionate because their boundaries keep them out of resentment. When I was writing the book, I looked at the story of the Good Samaritan, because I always feel like I was doing a chapter on kindness, and I always feel like when we preach on the Good Samaritan, we're always the Good Samaritan. We're always the hero, right? And we act it out. Did you do that in Sunday school? You know, the first person that came across was a social worker who was really busy. The second person was a nurse who was really busy. Then a priest came and they were really busy. And then we're the Good Samaritan. That helps. And Samuel Wells, who's written some amazing stuff on this, says, you know, that's the way we see it in the West, but actually maybe we're the blind beggar at the side of the road. We're the guy who's been beaten up. And Jesus is the hero. Jesus is the Good Samaritan. And sometimes it's about learning to accept kindness. Maybe sometimes from people who think differently to us. It's letting go of our pride. I used to think pride was just people with a big head who were annoying and talked about themselves all the time. But I realized that pride is being hurt a lot of the time, keeping people at a distance. We need to carry on leading when we're not okay. You know, I'll be really honest and vulnerable with you. I'm not okay. You know, most of you know Joel Edwards was a really good friend of mine. He passed away a couple of weeks ago. It's not okay. He died too young. Amazing legacy. We had two other people close to in last couple of weeks who also passed away. You know, but I know that within that God is with us, and we need to be more real and more honest. Beautiful quote from Henry Nouwen, who I'm sure you've heard of before, says this: no one escapes being wounded. We're all wounded people, whether physically, emotionally, mentally, or spiritually. The main question is not how can we hide our wounds so we don't have to be embarrassed, but how can we put our woundedness in the service of others? When our wounds cease to be a source of shame and become a source of healing, we've become the wounded healers. I use that analogy of the railway track, Rick and Kay Warren. And I guess I always have to hold on to the fact that one day the two tracks will meet, and all pain, all anxiety, all depression, all cancer, all loss will merge, and God will absorb it. And there'll be a new heaven and a new earth, and everything will be restored. But until that day comes, we've got to create a different culture. I think bouncing forwards, if not now, then when? We've got an opportunity. We've got an opportunity to do things differently. I really hope, I'm going to pray for you guys, that today's been helpful. And I didn't want to go on too long. And in terms of resources that could help, Spring Harvest, I don't know if you've seen their theme for next year. It's called Restore, Renew, Rebuild. It's just brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. And so, you know, these guys, you know, I've known them for many, many years. They think, they pray, they come to this theme before COVID. And I just think it's going to be a really prophetic time. So if, you know, as a church, as a leader, you want to book into Spring Harvest or consider it, I think it's going to be a really powerful week. The other thing that we're doing is we're taking part in what's called the Big Bounce Forward. So here's the thing. If you're a leader here, you can get a free copy of this book right now. We'd love to give you a free copy. And if you go on the Big Bounce Forward website, the Big Church Read website, the Big Church Read is basically a massive reading club. It's brilliant. It's a book club. And on each chapter, there's a video, which is about 2 or 3 minutes. You can do it with small groups. You could do it in your church. You could do it in any context. And people read through the book together. The whole idea, I think, is, you know, over coffee, you always do the chit chat thing. This is quite nice. It's sort of like, what did you read the book? What did you make of it? What did you agree with? What did you disagree with? And we're giving the books away with a Big Church Reader to leaders. So if you want a free book and you want to read it, suss it out, you can sign up online. I'm sure someone will stick the link in. The other thing I wanted to say is, if you're a leader here and you are really struggling and you'd really benefit going on a retreat for a day, we're thinking of how we run those. Our retreats will not be sit around and listen to a talk. They'll probably be, let's pray for each other and go down the pub and chat. But please email me if you're interested in connecting with other leaders around the country and just doing that. There's no agenda. I've been to so many leaders retreats that just bore me. So I just want to be normal and have a drink and chat and pray. And so do get in touch with us as well. And lastly, if we can bless your church or bless your youth group or bless your school in any way possible, please get in touch. We're doing a little tour in November around the country on the back of the book. And we would love to be able to support and help in any way that we can in Kimsugi Hope. We're here to serve. So if you want us to come to your church, please let us know and we'll see what we can do. I'm going to pray. Please, just for a couple of minutes, stay focused and let God minister to you. Father God, I thank you for everyone on this call. And Lord, busy people juggling lots and lots and lots of stuff. God, I pray that they would know that they are loved. Lord, I pray that they would know the difference between acceptance and resignation. We do not quit, but acceptance is the first place to healing. We will have blessings and we will have battles. Father, where we've been too strong for too long, where shame has really taken hold of us and we've kept things quiet, and yet actually we're scared that if we were vulnerable, what would happen? God, I pray that you'd break the shackles of shame. Lord, that you'd help us to own those stories. Father God, that we'd accept our limitations, that we'd realize that we are not the hero. You are the hero. I thank you. We don't have to be the hero. You are the hero. God, I pray that you would show us the things that build our resilience, the things that push that river up. Those rocks aren't going to go away until the day we die, but we don't have to crash every 5 seconds. And so, God, I pray for every single person listening, God, to this. I pray that they would know the things that raise their resilience levels up, and they'd know that they're loved and they're cared for. God, I love you. We love you. We love you. We love you. Love you. Amen. Amen. Guys, hang around in the chat. We're all there, and I'm going to just finish by showing you that video I talked about earlier about the beautiful lady. So authentic, so real, and I almost pray that we could get to that level of authenticity within our society as we try and bounce forward. Thank you so much for spending your time with us this lunchtime. May God bless you. Check this out.
What's your name?
My name's Jane. When I sing, I go by Nightbird.
Oh, that's nice.
Nightbird?
That's right.
What are you going to be singing for us tonight?
I'm singing an original song called It's Okay.
It's okay.
Yeah.
It is. It's okay.
It's okay.
What is It's Okay about?
It's Okay is the story of the last year of my life.
What do you do for a living?
I have not been working for quite a few years. I've been dealing with cancer.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm okay.
All right.
Can I ask you a question? How are you now?
Last time I checked, I had some cancer in my lungs, my spine, and my liver.
Wow.
So you're not okay?
Well, not in every way, no. It's important that everyone knows I'm so much more than the bad things that happen to me.
Yes.
All right. Sing for us.
Good luck. Nightbird.
I moved to California in the summertime. I changed my name thinking that it would change my mind.
arms, they would stay behind. I was a stick of dynamite and it just was a matter of time, yeah. Oh dang, oh my, now I can't hide. Said I knew myself, but I guess I lied. It's okay, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. If you're lost, we're all a little lost, and it's alright. It's okay, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. If you're lost, we're all a little lost, and it's alright. It's alright, it's alright, it's alright. I wrote 100 pages, but I burned them all. Yeah, I burned them all. I blow through yellow lights and don't look back at all. I don't look back at all. Oh, dang, oh my, now I can't hide. Said I knew what I wanted, but I guess I lied. It's okay, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. If you're lost, we're all a little lost, and it's alright. It's okay, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. If you're lost, we're all a little lost, and it's alright. Oh, it's alright to be lost sometimes.
Wow. Your voice is stunning.
It is.
Absolutely stunning. And I totally agree with what Howie said, you know, about authenticity. You know,
You can't wait until life isn't hard anymore before you decide to be happy.
there are, however, there have been some great singers this year. And I'm not going to give you a yes. I'm going to give you something else. Really special. For you.